Regardless of which path you're taking for your design, you're being asked to write use cases. I just want to be fair, use cases are really more typically associated with requirements. I'm not entirely sure why they chose to put this as an activity for design, but it is really a useful activity for design. So what I mean by requirements is use cases fundamentally show the interaction between people or other systems and your system. This is the typical syntax for a use case diagram. You have a person as shown by a little stick figure, and then bubbles, which are things that your system can do. Now, it's really important to understand what a use case is and what a use case is not. A use case is not flow. If you watch the structured design approaches, this is completely different. This is from object orientation, though not exclusively limited to that. And these bubbles mean something different. Think of these bubbles like a menu. When you walk into a restaurant, you can say, I want a cheeseburger, I want a steak, I want a salad. But it doesn't give you any details about how those things are. You don't get an appetizer. You don't show inside the menu which appetizer you get, then which dessert you get, then which dinner you get, then which dessert you get. There's not an order associated with that. There's just things in the menu, and you can have them whenever you want to. As a user, I could say, hey, give me a hot fudge sundae, and then bring me a salad, and then bring me a cheeseburger, then bring me some soup, and I want them in that order, and that's fine. That's the user's prerogative. The idea of a use case is to show all those features that can be accessed by the user. If there's other rules on how they're used, that's hidden later on. We worry about those details later on. I just want to show which users are allowed to do which things. And so the point of a use case diagram is tell me who the users are and what are the things that the system does that I need to code for eventually at some point, or at least solve for, if not writing new code. And so it's very limited picture, but it's a very useful picture. It's not giving me everything the system does. It's not even telling me any rules of what the system does outside of the service offerings. But it's a really great amount of information for a very small format. It's very simple. I can really see the scope. Think of it like the context of the requirements that's going on inside of here. And that's what we want to see is who do I care about servicing and what things are my building. And it really tells me what my system's going to be looking like at that point. And so I can do even better than that by saying, hey, I can add in domain pictures to this as well. I can say for my entire system, I'm going to have a mobile application and I'm going to have a website. And these are the things that can happen in my mobile app. These are the things that happen on my website. Notice they might be the same thing I can do. I can view items in the mobile app or I can view items in the website. They may be the same steps. They probably are going to have some variations because a use case is going to be written from the viewpoint of a person sitting down at a keyboard and mouse, or a person sitting down with a little small phone screen in front of them, or a person sitting down with a game controller, or a person that is not involved at all. They could have faxed in a document. Now it's a document that's been received and scanned and OCR'd and dealt with. It could be a file that's being received by a batch job. It could be a web service that's been called by some other system that we don't know who it is. Again, when we define the user, we're not talking about Tony. I'm not the user. We're talking about instructor. We're talking about student. We're talking about customer. We're talking about underwriter. We're talking about insurance agent. We're talking about fantasy football owner or a league commissioner. It's a role that's going to be played inside of there. And this gives us a view not only into the services that are available, it actually gives us a view to the security that's going on inside of here. What things are certain users allowed to do? A team owner is allowed to propose a trade, but the league commissioner of your fantasy sports league is the only one that's allowed to approve a trade. And so the team owner can't just approve any trade themselves. And so it's important to be able to specify that type of rules incidentally by defining the people and the behaviors and what they can do. Now, again, these are just a diagram, and all you're going to be asked to produce for this class is just a diagram. But a use case is more than a diagram. If you've taken other classes, you've heard about this, there's a document that backs up use cases. The picture gives us the context. And so when you're doing your application, you should be thinking of many things. You should have 5 or 6 or 8 bubbles that you're going to be showing of all the great things your system does. I don't care about the details drilled down. I want to see that you have a big picture view, but in a real world, each bubble has its own document that backs it up. And in that document, it shows the user does this, the system does that. Then the user does this, the system does that. And then this rule kicks up. And if the user clicks the wrong button, this exception pops up. And if the website, the internet goes out on the website, then we can't access it from the mobile app, then this thing happens. And so we want to capture all those details in the document. They do not appear in the diagram. We don't need them there. We can capture that at a high level. So when you're trying to build your use cases, keep it simple, but think broadly, not specific. Don't drill down into a specific one, but think, what else should my system do? Users can log in, the users can log out, they can buy stuff, they can return stuff, they can sign up for the loyalty program. That's for a sales website. Let's think about something else. So again, fantasy sports. I can sign up for a team. I can draft a team. I can propose a trade. I can restructure my roster. I can drop a player. Those are all things that would show up individually as bubbles. So think of your application. What can you do in your application? And that's that first picture. From there, we'll dive into design pieces, whether it's object orientation or whether it's structured design or whatever. But the use case is where we start and set the context for everything else that comes up.